some legislation was introduced today that is the type of legislation that just gets me excited. You understand? Something I can fully support. I think you want to know more about it. We're going to break it down for you right here on TBTV. Now, every once in a while, there'll be something that happens in Congress that goes, it makes you go, wow, that's all right, I mean, you're like dozing off and then, you're just totally, drunk with frustration and totally gave up on these bastards and you're like, And then something will wake you up and you go, oh, what the hell is that? And you look and you're, hey, that's all right. I can get behind that. Yeah? Well, one of those things happened today is when I noticed, thanks to Suzanne Murphy, who sent me this.
Today we are discussing an outrage that is impacting the health and well-being of tens of millions of Americans. And that is that the people of our country pay by far, not even close, the highest prices in the world for the prescription drugs they need. That has got to end, and the legislation that we are supporting will do just that. People walk into a doctor's office because they are sick. Doctor diagnoses the illness, writes out a prescription, but that individual cannot get the medicine that he or she needs. And what happens? What happens is that that person will become sicker, maybe ending up in the hospital at great cost to the system. And let's be clear, sometimes that individual may die. With a possible exception, in my view, of Wall Street, the pharmaceutical industry is the most powerful political force in this country. They have spent more than $4 billion in lobbying and campaign contributions over the past 20 years, and they have hired some 1,400 lobbyists, often former leaders of our two major parties, to fight for their profits. In other words, they own Washington. How many Americans have to get sick? How many Americans have to die before Congress is prepared to take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry? The American people are demanding that Congress listen to their concerns and not the power of the pharmaceutical industry. And today, we do that. We do that with three major pieces of legislation that would substantially reduce prescription drug prices in this country and also save the federal government significant sums of money. And I'm not going to go into it at length because the members of Congress here will discuss them at greater length. But one of them is the Prescription Drug Price Relief Act, which says that in America we should not be paying more than the people in other countries. The Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Act says that we have to use the clout of Medicare to negotiate fair prices with the pharmaceutical industry. The Affordable and Safe Prescription Drug Importation Act says that with so many advocates of unfettered free trade, yes, pharmacists and distributors should be able to bring lower cost prescription drugs into this country. Let me conclude by saying this. As many of you know, President Trump over and over again has talked about the high cost of prescription drugs. During his campaign, he said that he was going to stop the pharmaceutical companies from, quote, getting away with murder, end quote. Well, today, I say to President Trump, if you are serious about lowering prescription drug costs in this country, support our legislation and get your Republican colleagues on board.
It is interesting as I listen to Senator Sanders talk about the effects that this can have, of these skyrocketing prices can have. I cannot help but think about when I was in the hospital for 6 months. And after about about a month in there, a lady came to me who I had met in the hospital, and she said, I'm getting out today. I said, oh, that's wonderful. And I said, Miss Mary, give me your information. I'm going to write you a note. keep up with you. And then she started crying. And I said, why are you crying? She said, well, I came here to Hopkins. They had to give me the treatment. I got the operation. She said, I'm crying because I cannot afford the cure. Can't afford the cure. And so a poll found that 1 in 5 Americans reported not filling a prescription due to the high cost, just like that lady at Johns Hopkins. Another study found that most widely used brand name drugs have more than doubled in price since 2006. America, I say that we are better than that. So today I'm here to reintroduce the Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Act, co-led by my friends Representative Welch and Doggett, to allow Medicare to negotiate prices directly with drug companies. I'm also reintroducing the Affordable and Safe Prescription Drug Importation Act to allow Americans to buy safe, affordable prescription drugs from other countries. These bills are important because it's time to provide much-needed relief to the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, and I say to the President, no more talk, no more tweet, no more commotion, emotion, and motion and no results.
We live in a nation that professes to believe in ideals like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and millions of Americans' health and well-being is being put at risk by the outrageous and unjustifiably high cost of prescription drugs. We live in a nation where families are hurting, individuals are going without treatment, where people's lives are being put at risk because we are not doing the common sense things necessary to drive down the cost of drugs. Well, today we have 3 solid, common sense, pragmatic bills that can drive down the cost of drugs and end the shame in our nation that 1 in 5 Americans cannot afford their prescription drugs.
Representing Silicon Valley, I thought I'd take my 2 minutes to address the myth that these pharmaceutical companies need to fleece the American people in order to support medical innovation or new technology. That's the argument they make. Let's deal with facts. 63% of new drugs are invented or manufactured by startups, not by the big pharmaceuticals. Now, let me tell you, in Silicon Valley, no one asks when you come with a business plan, how long is your exclusive patent going to be? They don't ask that. We fund companies that have losses. What they ask is, how many people are going to use it? Are you telling me if someone invents a new cure for diabetes or Alzheimer's or cancer that they're not going to get funding? Second point, in the last 10 years, Pfizer, $139 billion went to stock buybacks. $139 billion. About $80 billion went to research and development. So let's just be very clear. They're charging Americans not to put money into research and development, which has been flat. They're charging Americans to pay their executives and their shareholders in stock buybacks. I mean, if they were putting all the money in research and development, at least they'd have an argument. Final point. From 2010 to 2016, every drug, all 210 drugs that have been approved by the FDA have had public funding. Every single one of them have been funded by the tax dollars. And then what happens? I mean, Senator Sanders is right to compare pharmaceuticals to Wall Street. Do you think the people running these pharmaceuticals are Nobel laureates or research professors? No. They're Harvard MBAs who could care less whether they were running Goldman Sachs or Pfizer. And what they are doing is taking public research, public investment, and privatizing the profit. And that's why we need reform that's going to help the American people and is in no way going to hurt innovation or new drugs being developed.
Well, let me first come to the defense of the Harvard Business School. And I think we ought to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Big Pharma. The reason why we've seen radio silence from the White House on this issue is that a funny thing happened on the way to the White House for President Trump. He began listening to the pharmaceutical drug industry. And he began buying those myths and misleading pitches. Everybody. It's affecting businesses. It's affecting our defense industry. It is impacting our national security. And so these three measures are more than common sense. They are a mandate for our nation's health security. The president's right now down at the border looking at this manufactured crisis. The real crisis is in our hospitals and our doctors' offices and the homes of Americans who have to choose between putting food on the table and buying drugs that are necessary for their survival. Americans should not be charged more than people in other countries. We deserve the same bargains that Europe and Canada have. Importing those drugs makes sense, and reducing the costs of those drugs after studies of what those costs are makes sense. And giving Medicare the ability to negotiate, what could be more basic?
Americans are demanding concrete actions. According to a recent poll, 73% of Americans believe that prescription drug prices are too high. And why are the pharmaceutical companies doing that? Why is Pharma doing it? Because it can. 10 of the most TV advertised drugs every month cost between $500 and $8,369. That's a per month figure for the top drugs you all see on television being advertised. And that's why these bills that are being introduced today are so critical. They finally put an end to the pharmaceutical industry's unchecked power to set soaring prices.
You know, there's a question. How is it in the United States we pay the most and have the least available when it comes to pharma prescriptions? And it's very simple. Government lets it happen. We are the only industrialized country where the representatives of the people and the leader of the country does not take action to protect consumers, to protect taxpayers, and to protect employers who are paying a lot for employer-sponsored health care. All of the things that Pharma say are myths. You know, when we were talking, Elijah and I, to the president, Tom Price was there, and he was worried about price negotiation because he called it price fixing. We do have price fixing. It's called whatever Pharma wants to charge, we have to pay. And they have these justifications about research. And as Khanna said, what? This is all about Wall Street. How do you make the most money? Right now, they are getting the benefit of no competition because there's no price negotiation. They're getting the benefit of the NIH that is doing an immense amount of publicly taxpayer-financed research. They're getting the benefit of the research and development tax credit that taxpayers pay for. And by the way, we just passed the Trump tax cut, $2.6 trillion added to the deficit, a lot of that in the pocket of Pharma. And did they do any R&D? No, they did stock buybacks that fattened executive pay. It is the consumers on the losing end, the taxpayers on the losing end. And right now, as we're sitting here, there is a proposed merger between two giants, Bristol-Myers Squibb and Celgene, $74 billion. And you know what happens with every single one of these mergers? The consumer, the taxpayer, and the employer pay. Because what they do is they now have more market power with those drugs. And what they do is they say, the cost of this, don't bother the shareholders. We don't want to disturb them. We'll raise the price of our products. That's happened time over and over again. And the only reason it happens is because we let them get away with it.
I believe that healthcare is a basic human right. And all over the world, there are people in developing parts of the world who are dying because they don't have access to healthcare or they don't have access to medicine. My aunt was one of those people. She died of diabetic shock at the age of 21 because she didn't have access to medication. And so in Minnesota last year, when I heard about Alec, who was 26 years old, who died because he couldn't access insulin to save his life, it did not make any sense to me. As an immigrant, as someone who came here 23 years ago, I came for the promise of America, where things are accessible and that there is an abundance of resources. Every single day, I am in shock that there are folks here in this nation that have to make a decision on whether they can put food on the table or get their medication that they need to save their lives. That there are people making a decision whether they file for bankruptcy or seek treatment for some disease that is going to kill them. Here in America, no one should be forced to make such choices.
Prescription drug prices continue to rise, and the only ones winning out right now are the pharmaceutical companies. Just to give you some context, in Colorado, about 570,000 Coloradans did not fill a prescription last year because it cost too much. Instead of listening to the demands of the pharmaceutical industry and their 1,400 lobbyists, as Congresswoman Sikowski recounted, it is time that Congress started listening to the American people, who overwhelmingly believe that the cost of medication is too expensive.
I hope that you were able to hear those Congress people say some things that sort of give us a little bit more context about what's going on with our pharmaceuticals. 3 pieces of legislation: the Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Act, the Prescription Price Relief Act. Then we have the Affordable and Safe Prescription Drug and Importation Act. All right, so 3 different pieces of legislation that are being introduced that all focus on our pharmaceuticals, our drug prices, how much we pay for it. What they will do is allow Medicare to directly negotiate with drug makers, let consumers import lower-priced pharmaceuticals from Canada. I was impressed by the legislation. With a Democratic Congress, maybe we got an opportunity. But also, one thing I saw that really drove it home was they were talking about how powerful the pharmaceutical is, Big Pharma is, you know? And that part right there really stuck with me because I never thought about it in those terms. Like, we hear people talk about Big Pharma, Big Pharma. Bernie Sanders said Big Pharma is almost as powerful as Wall Street. 1,400 lobbyists, 3 lobbyists for every congressperson, that they spent billions of dollars, $4 billion lobbying Congress. That's how much they've spent over the last 20 years. The 5 largest drug manufacturers took home $60 billion in profit. $60 billion in profit. The CEOs took home $113 million in compensation. Yeah. Wow. I like what Elijah Cummings said when he said, he was saying that Trump talked about making some changes to Big Pharma and said that people were getting ripped off. And that when he went to Washington, he was going to change that. And he said a funny thing happened when Trump got to Washington. Some people from Big Pharma talked to him. That's what happened to him. Same thing happened to Obama, didn't it? Yeah, but I don't think Elijah Cummings was going to be forthcoming with that when Obama was in office. But anyway, look, guys, look. I know some of you guys, like, you really watch this stuff and you're very much aware. You know what's going on with Congress. You know how you say one thing, they do another thing, or when they're not in power, they say something. Well, they're in power now, they got Congress. And guys, I know there are politicians that were on that stage that you don't trust. And I have to tell you, man, politicians are going to politic. So, like, I'm always looking at what we can get out of the people that are working for us, what we can get out of them today. I can't be too focused on what they didn't do last month or last year. It doesn't mean I'm going to go vote for them. It doesn't mean I'm going to raise money for them, but it does mean I got to be focused on what they're going to do next month, because that's what matters, right? And if you're going to call out a politician to hold them accountable for selling you out or for voting the wrong way on something, I mean, that's going to happen with a number of these politicians. It's just the way the system's set up. I have had to come to the conclusion that I'm going to be disappointed often. But if I'm going to fight for the people, if I'm going to be a champion for the people, if I'm going to be effective at all, if I'm going to be able to move the needle in any direction, if I'm going to be helpful, I have to be willing to have somewhat of a short memory. Not erase my memory, but have somewhat of a short memory that keeps also focused on what's coming up and be focused on what's right now. And what's right now is this bill, this legislation that I would love to see become a thing, to see it become law, to see it implemented. And I have to support that. I just believe that if you hold some of these people, everybody's not going to be consistent. And if we don't say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna overlook some of this stuff because what we have right now is an opportunity to get something out of these people that have been sent to Washington to work for us. Well, look, you got to go that way. And honestly, guys, I mean, if you're gonna call out people like Cory Booker for taking money and not doing the right thing last year, that'd be like calling out, calling out a puppy dog for barking at the squirrel. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's right. What you doing barking at that squirrel, puppy dog? That's what puppies do. All right, so that's how I look at it. It's not optimal, but it is reality of what we got to deal with. So anyway, I just want to share that with you. Switching gears. Oh, this is my screen. I decided to make this permanent because I love to remind people when they come to this show, they may not have seen this before. I want to make sure they understand. This is our budget over here. This is the budget. And I just want to remind people, the blue, that's military spending. That whole blue is military. And I just want to remind people that one of these little tiny slithers is the part of the military that helps the military vets. See, this big blue, conservative people, if there's any conservatives watching, the big blue is not for the vets. The big blue is for the bombs. One of these little mofos is for vets. If this big blue here was a part of helping the vets, maybe 20 or so vets wouldn't kill themselves every day. Also, the people that love to say, all you people want is handouts. One of these little things here is called social programs. That's what you're complaining about. One of these slithers, just one of them. So I just want to keep this up, and periodically we'll come back to it just to remind people, because I'm tired of people not knowing anything, and saying things because, I don't know, they heard Bill O'Reilly say it 4 years ago and thinking it's true, or because Sean Hannity doesn't put like budgets up, he just says stuff. As we stated earlier, become a member of the Tim Black Wolfpack by going to patreon.com, Tim's Take Live. Also, you can find me here on YouTube and join my Wolfpack there. I got a comedy DVD. Yeah, I feel better when I talk about. I got a comedy DVD called Racist People Suck, right? Go to racistpeoplesuck.com and check that out, where I talk about politics and race and other stuff too. It's great. I think it's funny. Everybody who's brought it, who has written me about it, has told me they loved it. So won't you get it? You download it You get it like that, real quick to your inbox, and have a laugh on me. Start your new year off with some laughs. All right. I see you guys tomorrow right here at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more of the Tim Black Show. Shout out to my wolf pack. Shout out to the Truth Bomb activists. Shout out to Suzanne Murphy, the whole crew. Thank you guys for tuning in. Tough, tough, tough.